Furiosa once again rules the Wasteland. The long-awaited follow-up to Mad Max Fury Road, Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga, is almost here. And before I let you know what I thought of it, psst, I liked it. I got to speak to the film stars Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth about undertaking such a massive and physical film. Going into this, infamously, that movie was very hard to make. Did you know what you were getting into when you were making, when you signed on to this one?
Yes and no. I deliberately didn't read the book before I went out there. I think I could read it now. But I think we're both lucky enough to know people that had made that movie, and so I just I asked Nick Holt for advice, and he just said, trust George.
Yeah, I just sort of take it with a grain of salt too, the kind of the Hollywood folklore and what happened and what didn't and the troubles and so on. And I'm sure you had the same experience. I met George and went, oh, he's a wonderful human being and let's go to work, you know? And neither of us shy away from the kind of challenges and so on that a film offers up. In fact, we probably seek it out more than anything, and I think there's something rewarding about that too. And so this is one of the best experiences I had in the set.
George obviously wrote out an entire Bible of backstory about this film and all the characters and everything like that. Did that make it easier or to kind of find the character? Was he always a font of knowledge for that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think also one of my favorite things about working with George is there are 3 units running at all times, and he is on top of everything. He has okayed every single shot. Nothing is going to print unless he has his actual fingerprints on it. So I think knowing that he was hyper aware of how everything was going to cut together kind of puts you at ease.
Yeah. When you have a director that's less experienced, you know, and you at times feel like you're trying to sort of having to micromanage or have an opinion on things that aren't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily be of your focus, that becomes a real challenge. You're pulled in different directions. Whereas to be able to just do your bit and know that he has, you know, every other angle and piece of design and so on covered, and there's nothing that, there's no stone that hasn't been, you know, overturned, and it's just fantastic. You know, you get to just do your thing as an actor.
In terms of the action sequences, which are, you know, very lengthy, how was that to shoot from your perspective? Obviously, there's a lot going on at all times, but like, did it feel like you knew where you were at any given moment within your action sequences?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just speaking for myself, I feel like each of the action sequences in this movie are their own little story and world, and so it didn't feel hard to tap into that. You know, I think about the sequence Stowaway, which took 78 days to film, and yes, definitely when you're on day 50, you're just like, whoa, I'm still on this rig. But because it has such a storyline through it, you see a massive acquirement of skills from her part. You kind of get reintroduced to her again. That felt very satisfying. Yeah.
There's also like George storyboards the entire film years before we've even shot. I remember the first script I read had inserted within it storyboards and drawings of how the scenes were going to look and what the shots were going to feel like. And so there was always a reference to look to. Even before doing the simplest of things, George would say, okay, do you know where we come from? Do you know where we're going? This is where we are. So you were constantly aware of what the character was doing and why.
What were your favorite vehicles to either look at or to be behind the wheel of?
It's hard to pick, but I do have a real soft spot for the rig, just because I spent 78 days on it. So I know every inch of that rig. And when it becomes a double tanker, I remember being like, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Thing of beauty.
I love the motorbike that then becomes a sort of chariot with a number of motorbikes attached to it. It was awful to drive, you know, sort of wanted to go in a straight line.
We rode one yesterday.
We rode one yesterday, which was even worse. But it looked really cool, and it was a sort of inspiration from a few things. There was, I don't know in what year, but I think 20, 30 years ago, the police in Victoria used to have this bike race with sort of chariots as motorbikes, and George says it was from that, but also Ben-Hur influence, and Dementus saw himself as somewhat of a sort of an emperor of another time, and so he'd fashioned himself a chariot, as you do.
It's fascinating that was a real vehicle that you could drive.
We didn't know about that until this press tour, and then George was like, yeah, there's a picture, and we're like,
here it is, yeah.
Where did you get that from?
9 years after the fact, it's still astonishing to think that a legacy sequel to Ozploitation favorite Mad Max is one of the best movies ever made. Not only that, it garnered so many Oscar nominations and won several. But here we are, in a better cinematic world because George Miller finally got to make Mad Max Fury Road. That movie is a miracle. With all those plaudits, how could a follow-up ever dream to match it? In the case of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, it doesn't. How could it? What it does do is give us a compelling, exciting adventure in a world I love being in. Infamously, Miller and co-writer Nico Lathoris had so much of Fury Road planned out ahead of time that this movie was written before they'd shot that movie. All of what happened to Furiosa in her life leading up to that fateful moment in the war rig existed in writing. Because of that, Furiosa, the movie, is more narrative-focused than Fury Road, taking place over many years rather than a couple of days. It feels much more like a regular-ass movie, which, again, is not a bad thing. The story follows Furiosa as a child, played by Aliyah Brown, as fate takes her away from the idyllic green place of many mothers and puts her in the clutches of the insane biker warlord Dementus, played by Chris Hemsworth. Dementus, who is a brutal yet charismatic leader with an enormous horde of followers, while looking for a place of abundance, runs afoul of Immortan Joe, played by Lashley Holm. The two make an uneasy alliance of mutually assured destruction, while the supremely capable and patient Furiosa, played as an adult by Anya Taylor-Joy, gains her skills and lets her anger guide her. Along the way, Furiosa meets Praetorian Jack, played by Tom Burke, a capable Wastelander who works for Immortan Joe as a driver. It's through this character that Furiosa sees more than her own survival, her own escape. Naturally, as we know what comes later, we know this is unlikely to last. This is an unfair place for decent people. To say the least, this is an atypical Mad Max movie. Rather than a single adventure, it tracks a life. Instead of standing alone, it fleshes out the circumstances of the previous film. And Max isn't even the central character. So because of that, it's possible some people won't vibe with Furiosa. However, the action, the bombast, the filmmaking prowess are all still on display in full force. Miller knows this world inside and out, and it's a joy to spend time in it. Additionally, Miller offers us various action sequences in parts of the Wasteland ecosystem we haven't really seen before. Gastown and the Bullet Farm are real locations in Furiosa, not simply far-off ideas. Weirdly, we get a sense for how the economy of these three places work in tandem. If you ever wondered why the war rig is so important, or how the People Eater got his groove back, this is the movie for you. The centerpiece of the movie is a 15-minute action extravaganza that reportedly took 78 days to film, in which Furiosa and Praetorian Jack in the newly minted war rig have to fight off a horde of raiders attacking from both land and air. The sheer ability of Miller and company to give the rig its own geography is astounding. We always know where Furiosa is on the machine and where the weapons are at her disposal. It's exhilarating to watch. While we do watch the adventure through Anya Taylor-Joy's seething eyes, she has, effectively, the Max Rockatansky role. And by that I mean she doesn't say a whole lot, only apparently 30 lines. The actor who very probably has the most lines is Chris Hemsworth, who is absolutely killing it as Dementus. He plays the biker boss as a kind of violent wasteland messiah attempting to recruit others to his cause. His performance is phenomenal. A Just World would give him a Best Supporting Actor nomination, but I can't claim that's where we live. Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, probably won't revolutionize the film industry the way Mad Max Fury Road did, but it's a damned exciting action film with a great mix of familiar and new additions to the franchise. It even has some references to the 2015 video game Mad Max, which I absolutely did not expect. I hope George Miller gets to make his proposed sequel to Fury Road, because after Furiosa, he's proving what a wonder this unlikely franchise is. And that's why we're giving Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, a 4 out of 5. But tell us, what do you think? Are you looking forward to Furiosa? What's your favorite style of post-apocalypse? Mine's the one with the frogs. And would you drive a chariot made of motorcycles? I would. Let us know in the comments below, and for everything else in the pop cultural wasteland, keep it glued to Nerdist.com.